My girlfriend mocked me in front of all our friends for having a small body count. I just smiled and stayed quiet. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved one. That night started out normal. A group of us were sitting in the living room, music playing in the background, red cups in hand, everyone laughing louder than they needed to. Madison, my girlfriend, had taken the couch like it was her throne. She loved being the center of attention. I sat beside her, proud in a quiet way, thinking this was just another night with friends. At first, everything was fine. People were trading jokes, teasing each other about small things, the usual banter. Then someone asked Madison what it was like dating me. She leaned back, smirked, and with a voice sharp enough to cut glass, said, "Well, let's just say Hunter doesn't have much experience. His body count's pretty small, like laughably small." The room broke into laughter. Not just light chuckles, real belly laughs, the kind that echo and sting. I felt the sound in my chest like a heavy drum. My ears burned, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Madison laughed too, sipping her drink like she'd just dropped the best punchline of the night. I forced a smile, the kind you put on when you're trying to act like nothing bothers you. My lips stretched, but my stomach twisted. I laughed along with them, even made a little shrug like it was no big deal. But inside, I was sinking. The joke wasn't just about numbers. It was about me, about my worth, about the trust one thought we had. The party kept going. Someone changed the music, another joke got told, and just like that, the moment passed for everyone else. But not for me. I sat there, sipping from my cup, nodding when people spoke, pretending my mind was still in the room. Truth was, I was somewhere else entirely. Every time Madison leaned in to whisper to a friend or laugh louder than anyone else, I thought back to her words. Laughably small. She didn't just embarrass me, she turned me into entertainment. And the worst part, nobody defended me. Not one friend spoke up. I was the joke, and the only way I could save face was to play along. On the outside, I stayed calm. I didn't confront her, didn't roll my eyes, didn't storm off like a fool. I knew if I reacted, it would only make me look weaker. So I swallowed it, let it sit heavy in my chest, and smiled like I didn't care. But I did care. More than I wanted to admit. While Madison laughed with her friends, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't forget this. I wouldn't let it slide. She thought she could make me the joke in front of everyone, but one day, she'd see that I wasn't the kind of man you could laugh off. That night, I stayed silent. But silence isn't the same as forgiveness. It was the beginning of something I hadn't even planned yet. I first met Madison through a couple of college friends. It wasn't anything planned. We were all hanging out at a small get-together, and she walked in like she already knew everyone. She had that kind of presence, bright, easy, and impossible to ignore. She carried herself with confidence, spoke without hesitation, and laughed in a way that made people turn their heads. I noticed her right away, and before the night was over, we were talking like we had known each other longer than a few hours. What pulled me toward her was how different she seemed from most people I knew. She was adventurous, always talking about the next trip she wanted to take, or some crazy story from her past. There was no shyness in her. She had this energy that made the room feel lighter, and I found myself wanting to be around that. I was quieter, more reserved, but somehow, she made that feel okay. When we started dating, it felt exciting in a way I hadn't experienced before. Everything was new, late-night drives, spontaneous plans, long talks where she would tell me her dreams as if they were already within reach. She liked to take risks, while I preferred stability, and at first, that balance worked. She brought the fire, and I provided the ground to stand on. I gave her my trust without hesitation, always showing up when she needed me, listening to her when she wanted to talk, and doing my best to make her feel supported. In the beginning, she returned that with affection. She would call me her safe place when things in her life got overwhelming. She would lean on me, and I felt proud that I could be the one she turned to. I thought we made a good team, her boldness paired with my steadiness. For a while, it really did feel like love, the kind where you start imagining what the future could look like. But slowly, the tone began to change. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. Just little remarks slipped into conversations. She might tease me about the way I dressed or laugh at how cautious I could be. She would say things like, "Oh, you're so boring sometimes," with a smile, as if it was just harmless fun. On the surface, they were jokes, but underneath, I felt the sting. I brushed it off in the beginning, telling myself not to take things so seriously. Everyone teases each other, right? That's what I kept reminding myself. Still, the comments piled up. A small laugh about how I wasn't adventurous enough, a playful jab about me being too quiet at parties, or a sarcastic remark when I didn't go along with her risky idea. She always laughed after, as if it meant nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was testing how far she could push. That was the first crack. Not big enough to break us apart, but enough for me to notice. And once you notice, you can't unsee it. The car ride home after the party was quiet at first. The streets were almost empty, the streetlights flashing across the windshield in slow rhythm. Madison was humming along to a song on the radio, tapping her fingers against the window as if the night had been nothing more than fun and laughter. She looked relaxed, carefree, and it bothered me how unaffected she seemed. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, the laughter from earlier still ringing in my ears. I finally asked her why she said what she did in front of everyone. My voice wasn't raised, but it was firm enough that she knew I wasn't joking. She turned her head, smirked a little, and said, "Relax, babe. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." Then she leaned back in her seat, as if the conversation was already over. Her words hit harder than the laughter at the party. It wasn't just what she said earlier. It was how she dismissed me now, as if my feelings were some kind of inconvenience. She didn't pause to think about how it might have hurt me, didn't offer the smallest apology. Instead, she made it sound like the problem was me for even bringing it up. I realized right there that this was how she handled things. She never owned up, never admitted when she crossed a line. She always found a way to make me feel like I was the one out of place. The rest of the drive, she kept talking about how fun the night had been. She laughed about who drank too much, about the silly games, about little moments I barely remembered. I nodded along, but inside I wasn't listening. I was thinking about how easy it was for her to act like nothing had happened. When we finally got home, she slipped off her shoes, dropped onto the bed, and was asleep almost instantly. I stood there for a while, watching her breathe like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked peaceful, but my mind was restless. I lay down next to her, staring at the ceiling in the dark, replaying the night over and over again. The more I thought about it, the clearer things became. This wasn't about one joke. It was about the way she treated me whenever I tried to draw a line. She turned it back on me, always. If I said I didn't like something, I was too serious. If I felt hurt, I was too sensitive. It was a pattern, and I had been ignoring it for too long. That night, I didn't argue anymore. I didn't push for an apology she would never give. Instead, I stayed quiet, but my silence wasn't empty. It was full of questions, full of doubts I hadn't let myself face until then. As she slept soundly beside me, I realized for the first time that maybe I was giving more than I was ever going to get back. It started slowly, almost too small to notice at first. Madison began making more plans without me. She would get dressed up in the evenings, grab her bag, and say she was meeting the girls. Sometimes she gave me names, sometimes she didn't. When I asked where they were going, her answers were vague. Just out, probably a bar, nothing crazy. She always said it in a way that shut the door on more questions, as if asking again would mean I didn't trust her. I wanted to believe her. I told myself that everyone deserves time with their friends, that it was normal. But something about how often it started happening made me uneasy. What used to be an occasional outing turned into a routine. She was gone more nights than she was home, and when she came back, she never shared much about what happened. If I asked, she brushed it off with quick stories that sounded rehearsed. The changes didn't stop there. She became attached to her phone in a way she hadn't before. She used to leave it lying around, sometimes forgetting where she placed it, but now it never left her side. At dinner, she kept it face down on the table. If it buzzed, she'd glance quickly, then set it aside without explaining. Once, I caught her tilting the screen away from me when a message came through. She noticed me noticing and laughed it off, but the way her hand tightened around the phone told me it wasn't nothing. Her habits shifted in other ways too. Showers became longer, sometimes stretching close to an hour. She would step out smelling like a different perfume, one she hadn't worn before. When I asked about it, she said she was just trying something new. Little things added up. The extra time in front of the mirror, the sudden care with her clothes before she said she was heading to a study session, the late nights that didn't match the stories she told. I tried to quiet the voice in my head, the one telling me something was wrong. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous boyfriend, the one who imagines problems where there aren't any. But the feeling grew heavier each time she left without much explanation. It wasn't just what she did, but how she acted, like she had built a wall between us that hadn't been there before. I noticed the distance not only in her routines, but in the way she looked at me. Her eyes didn't hold the same warmth when we talked. Sometimes, when I was speaking, she seemed distracted, her attention drifting somewhere else. I caught myself wondering who she was really thinking about, who she was really texting, who she was really meeting on those nights she said were for friends. Deep down, I already knew. Something was off, and it wasn't going away. It happened on a night that felt ordinary. We were sitting together, both of us tired from the day, scrolling through our screens while deciding what to eat. My phone had slipped somewhere between the cushions, and hers was closer. I asked if I could use it to place an order. She handed it over without hesitation, not even looking up from the television. For a moment, everything seemed normal. As I tapped through the delivery app, a message banner slid across the top of her screen. It wasn't from one of the girls she always mentioned. It was from someone named Jason. The words were simple, nothing openly romantic, but they carried a weight that caught me off guard. Wish I could have seen you longer last night. Next time, no rushing. I froze, the phone heavy in my hand. It wasn't the kind of message you'd expect from a casual friend. The tone was too personal, too familiar, and it left no question that there was more behind it. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm, glancing up to make sure she hadn't noticed my pause. She was still focused on the show, laughing at a scene, unaware of what had just flashed across her screen. I finished the order as if nothing had happened, set the phone back beside her, and leaned back into the couch. My voice stayed steady when I told her the food would arrive soon. She nodded, eyes still glued to the television, and I let the silence stretch between us. On the outside, I was relaxed. On the inside, my thoughts were racing. The message replayed in my head again and again. I wanted to ask right then, who's Jason? Why is he sending you messages like that? But I knew how that conversation would go. She'd laugh, roll her eyes, and tell me I was overthinking. She'd find a way to make me doubt myself, and I'd end up feeling like the unreasonable one. So I kept quiet. Instead of confronting her, I made a decision. If something was really happening, I needed proof. Undeniable proof that couldn't be twisted into another joke or excuse. From that night forward, I started paying closer attention. The way her phone never left her hand. The times she stepped outside to take a call. The sudden change in her schedule. Each detail mattered now. Each inconsistency was a piece of the puzzle. That night marked a turning point. Until then, I had only felt uneasy, suspicious, uncertain. But now I had a name, a message, a crack in the story she'd been giving me. I didn't show it, didn't let her see the shift in my mind, but something inside me had settled. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't crazy. Something was going on, and sooner or later, I was going to find out exactly what it was. The days after seeing Jason's name made me sharper. I began noticing things I had ignored before. Whenever I asked Madison simple questions, like where she had been or who she was with, her answers came with a defensive edge. Instead of just telling me, she'd snap, "Why do you always need to know?" Or, "Don't you trust me?" The shift in her tone was enough to tell me more than her words ever could. Her late nights became harder to explain too. She would come home later than she said she would, offering short stories that didn't quite fit together. If I pressed her, even gently, she would act like I was attacking her. I watched her carefully, and the picture slowly came together. The secrecy with her phone, the nights out that didn't add up, the tension whenever I asked for detail. One evening, the opportunity one had been waiting for presented itself. Madison had left her phone on the nightstand before stepping into the shower. The sound of running water filled the room, giving me a window I knew wouldn't last long. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the screen lighting up with a single swipe. I opened her messages and scrolled until I found the thread with Jason. What I saw made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a few harmless exchanges. It was a history stretching back weeks. Long conversations filled with teasing remarks, late-night confessions, and words that left no room for doubt. They weren't just chatting, they were meeting. He mentioned nights at his place, moments they shared when I thought she was with friends, excuses that suddenly made sense in a sickening way. Each line hit me like a blow. Madison wasn't just flirting. She was cheating openly, repeatedly, and without hesitation. She laughed in her messages in the same way she laughed in front of me. Only this time, it wasn't me she was laughing with. My stomach turned, and I had to put the phone down for a moment just to catch my breath. But anger didn't take over, not yet. I knew storming into the bathroom, shouting, demanding answers, would only give her the chance to spin it around on me. She was good at that. If I confronted her now, she would twist it, deny it, or make me seem like the crazy one. No, I couldn't afford that. I picked the phone back up, my hand steadier this time. Carefully, I began taking photos of the screen. Every message, every line, every detail that proved what she had done. I saved it all. The evidence piled up in my gallery, undeniable and permanent. By the time I finished, I had enough to expose everything. When Madison finally stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, I was lying on the bed like nothing had happened. She smiled faintly and asked if I'd been waiting long. I forced a small smile back, my heart heavy with the weight of what I now knew. She had no idea the truth was already in my hands. Lying beside Madison that night, I knew everything had changed, but I didn't let a single sign slip. She moved around the room as if life was perfectly normal, humming while she dried her hair, smiling at me before crawling under the covers. I stayed still, breathing evenly, pretending my mind wasn't running faster than it ever had. Every instinct in me wanted to confront her right then, to hold the phone in her face and demand an explanation, to ask how she could lie so easily to me night after night. But I forced myself to stay calm. I already knew how that scene would play out. She'd deny it, laugh at me for snooping, call me insecure, and somehow I'd end up defending myself. I wasn't going to give her that chance. The next morning, I woke up before her and watched the way she slept so peacefully, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That was when the decision became clear. Silence would be my weapon. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't give her even the smallest clue that I knew the truth. Instead, I would let her go on, let her believe she was getting away with it. Every lie she told from now on would only make my evidence stronger, and when the moment came, there would be no escape. So I played my role. I asked her about her day with the same casual tone as before. I laughed at her stories, held her hand when we walked together, and kissed her goodnight as if nothing in the world had changed. She didn't notice the difference, and that told me just how blind she was to the walls crumbling around. But beneath that calm surface, I was planning. I thought back to the night at the party when she made me a joke in front of everyone. That memory had burned into me, and I knew exactly how to strike back. If she could humiliate me in front of our friends, then that was where I would expose her. Not in private, not in whispers, but in the same circle where she laughed at me so easily. Her pride had always been her favorite mask, and tearing it away in front of the people she wanted to impress most would cut deeper than anything else I could say to her alone. Each day that passed, I gathered more. A screenshot here, a note there, keeping everything carefully hidden. It wasn't about rushing anymore. It was about patience, about timing. Madison thought she was untouchable, thought her charm could cover anything. That was fine. Let her believe it. I had already chosen my moment. When it came, it wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be simple, clear, and impossible for her to twist. And when she saw it, when everyone saw it, she'd finally understand what it felt like to be the one left exposed. The idea came to me one evening while Madison was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone and laughing at something I couldn't see. She loved being around people, loved the spotlight, and I knew that if I dangled the chance for another night like the last party, she would grab it without a second thought. So I brought it up casually, like it had just crossed my mind. Hey, what do you think about getting everyone together again? Same group, maybe at Jake's place this time. It's been a while since we've all hung out. Her eyes lit up instantly. She lowered her phone and smiled wide, the kind of smile she saved for when she was already picturing herself in the middle of the room, telling stories, laughing the loudest. That's a great idea. Everyone's been saying we should do it again. I'll text the group right now. I nodded, keeping my expression easy, as if I didn't care either way. Inside, though, I felt the plan slotting into place. While she tapped quickly on her screen, I slipped my own phone from my pocket and opened the hidden folder where I kept everything: screenshots, photos, proof she didn't know I had. The device felt heavier than usual, like it carried the weight of what was coming. Over the next few days, Madison grew more excited. She spent time picking outfits, talking about how much fun it would be, how everyone needed a night to loosen up. She rehearsed the evening in her head the way she always did, certain she'd be the star of the night. I watched her with a calm smile, giving no hint of what I was holding back. Whenever she asked me about snacks or music or who might bring drinks, I played along easily. I even added to the excitement, suggesting little details that made it feel like nothing more than a harmless gathering. She never suspected a thing. To her, I was the same steady boyfriend, dependable and agreeable. But in my mind, every laugh and every plan only pushed us closer to the moment I had been waiting for. On the day of the hangout, she spent extra time in front of the mirror. I leaned in the doorway, phone in my pocket, watching her apply lipstick and adjust her hair with the focus of someone preparing for a performance. She caught me looking and grinned. "What?" she teased, spinning lightly. "You're lucky, you know. Not everyone gets to show up with me on their arm." I laughed softly, just enough to make it seem genuine. "Yeah, I know." She winked, satisfied, and turned back to the mirror. What she didn't know was that this wasn't just another night out with friends. This was the night the mask would come off, the night the laughter she used against me would freeze in her throat. The stage was ready, and she had no idea she'd be the one performing. The night unfolded just like Madison hoped. Music filled the room, drinks were passed around, and laughter bounced off the walls. She was in her element, telling stories with wild hand gestures, soaking up every bit of attention. Friends leaned toward her, feeding off her energy, and I let her have it. I smiled, nodded, laughed when it seemed right, all while waiting for the perfect opening. Hours slipped by, the group loud and carefree, but my mind was clear. I felt the phone in my pocket, not as a weight this time, but as a weapon waiting to be drawn. I wasn't nervous. If anything, I felt calm, steady in a way I hadn't for weeks. Madison thought she was untouchable, and that was about to change. The chance came when someone joked about relationships, teasing another couple over a minor argument. Madison jumped in quickly, adding her own laugh, and I knew the moment had arrived. I leaned back in my chair, phone in hand, and spoke just loud enough for the room to hear. "Quick question," I said, my tone light casual. Does Jason get added to your total now, or should we save him for the next one? The noise cut off instantly. The room, which had been alive with chatter seconds before, fell into a silence so sharp it almost rang in my ear. Eyes darted between me and Madison. She froze, her smile collapsing before she could even hide it. What are you talking about? She stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of all the attention now pointed at her. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I unlocked my phone and held it up for everyone to see. With a calmness that felt practiced, I opened the messages. My thumb slid slowly, scrolling through line after line. Words she had written lit the screen. Flirty remarks, late-night plans, details that left no room for doubt. Gasps spread across the room. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another shifted uncomfortably, turning away. The disgust was thick, heavier than any laugh that had ever been thrown my way. Madison tried to speak, reaching for me, but her words tumbled out in fragments. It's not. She couldn't form a defense. Every time she opened her mouth, I scrolled further, letting her own messages betray her. Her face crumbled in front of everyone. The color drained from her cheeks, her usual confidence stripped away. She looked around desperately, but no one met her eyes. The friends who once cheered at her jokes now stared at her with disbelief, some shaking their heads, others whispering to each other. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than anything I could have said. For the first time, Madison had no joke, no smirk, no clever escape. She was exposed, and she knew it. After that night, Madison's world seemed to collapse piece by piece. The same friends who once laughed at her sharp remarks now kept their distance. Conversations that used to include her grew shorter, colder. Some stopped replying to her altogether. It wasn't a dramatic cutoff, but the silence was louder than any confrontation. People had seen what she'd done, and no amount of charm could erase it. She started with texts, long paragraphs flooding my phone the very next morning. Apologies tangled with excuses, promises laced with desperation. She called me endlessly, her name flashing on my screen at all hours, but I never picked up. When she realized I wouldn't answer, she showed up at my door, tears streaking down her face, begging me to just listen for a second. I stood behind the closed door, hands still, letting her words fall against the wood like rain I had no intention of stepping into. The more she reached out, the quieter I became. That silence wasn't emptiness. It was deliberate. It was the wall she could never climb. For once, she had no power to twist things, no stage to turn my pain into a punchline. Every unanswered message, every ignored call, was its own kind of justice. Meanwhile, our friends, saw the truth clearly. Some of them pulled me aside to say they had my back. Others admitted they had always sensed something off in the way she treated me. A few even cut ties with her completely, unwilling to keep someone around who could betray so easily. I hadn't asked for their loyalty, but I felt it steady and real. The same circle where she tried to humiliate me now stood by me instead. In quiet moments, I thought about everything that had happened. The sting of her betrayal was still there, a raw place inside me that I knew would take time to heal. But beneath that hurt was a steadier feeling, pride. Not the loud, boastful kind, something calmer, stronger. I hadn't let her reduce me to a joke again. I hadn't exploded, hadn't let her turn my anger into another weapon against me. I had taken control in my own way, on my own terms. One evening, as I walked home alone, I caught myself smiling. It wasn't a smile of joy, not the kind that comes from happiness or victory. It was something different. It was the quiet relief of knowing I had faced the worst she could do to me and walked away without bowing my. She had taken my trust, but she couldn't take my dignity. Madison could cry, apologize, beg for forgiveness as much as she wanted. It no longer mattered. My silence was the final answer, the one she couldn't twist or undo. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady again, certain of who I was. And that was enough. Do you think I made the right choice by staying silent and exposing Madison in front of our friends? Or should I have confronted her privately instead? I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed my story and want more, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.